Greetings and welcome everyone. Welcome to those here in the room. Welcome to the many of you online. I'm Nichola Dyer, Senior Advisor at the Global Seaweed Coalition, and it's my pleasure to guide this conversation today. On behalf of all of the organizing partners, let me welcome you all to this official side event at the 2024 UN High-Level Political Forum. I'm delighted to represent the Global Seaweed Coalition here. GSC is a global partnership established to support the safe and sustainable scale-up of the seaweed sector, grounded in science. Our communications manager, Azadine, who is on this webinar, will post some additional information about the coalition in the chat. A couple of housekeeping details before we get into the substance. For those online, then please let us know who you are and your institutional affiliation by posting that in the chat. And throughout, please feel free to post questions or comments in the chat. Azadine will be monitoring that, and he and the speakers will either respond directly there or they'll flag them to me so that we can air them during the Q&A portion. For those here in UNCTAD, rebranded now as the UN Trade and Development's New York office, please feel free to participate as well. Please feel free to participate online or by asking questions here in the room, and do let me know if you've got any questions. What's our objective with this event? It's to discuss the multifaceted contributions that seaweed is making to, and its potential to do even more for, the achievement of the goals that are under review at this HLPF, that is 1, 2, 13, 16, and 17. Now, I won't be surprised if we also hear how seaweed's contributing to other goals as well. We'll also talk about what's needed to mainstream the rapid growth and value of the sector into sustainable development action on the road to milestones like the United Nations Ocean Conference in 2025. Let me take you through the agenda now. First, Chantal Carpentier will provide some framing remarks. Chantal, who's well known to many here from her time heading UNCTAD's office in New York. She now serves in Geneva as the head of Trade, Environment and Climate Change and Sustainable Development branch for UN Trade and Development, and which again is the rebranded name of UNCTAD. Next, we'll be honored to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Kyoung Hwang, senior researcher at the Seaweed Research Institute, National Institute of Fisheries Science at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries of the Republic of Korea. And will share important perspectives from Korea, which is the third largest seaweed producing country in the world, on its experience with the seaweed sector and on the many ways in which its government has supported the sector's growth. In view of the late hour in Korea, though, please be aware, Un will leave shortly after delivering her keynote. We've built in a brief opportunity for a Q&A with her, which in practice is probably going to be one question and one answer right after her intervention. And then she's also kindly agreed to respond to additional questions by email. So she'll be leaving her email in the chat, and we'll share that as well. And I anticipate lots of questions about her presentation. We will then have a video message from Dr. Dalila Al-Khudairi, who's director at DG Mare at the European Commission, on the EU's support for the seaweed sector. We at the GSC worked closely with Dalila and with her team to co-organize the very first EU Algae Summit held last October in Paris. So following these framing perspectives, we'll then do a deep dive on seaweed's contributions to the SDGs under review at this HLPF. And we're privileged for that to have a panel of three amazing women, Dr. Lori Hoffman of the Alfred Wegener Institute, Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Science, and Bremerhaven University of Applied Sciences. Runa Ray, a fashion environmentalist and founder of Fashioning for Social Environmental Justice. And Anushka Concepcion, chair of the Global Seaweed Coalition's Strategic Advisory Council. After their presentations, we'll have a follow-up conversation, and then we'll open the floor up to Q&A. Finally, we're delighted to welcome Harrison Carissa, who is Senior Fisheries Specialist Aquaculture in the Environment, Natural Resources, and Blue Economy Global Practice of the World Bank, representing the World Bank's Global Director of Environment, Natural Resources, and Blue Economy, Valerie Hickey, who sends her apologies. He'll deliver closing remarks and a call to action on her behalf. And we would welcome your participation throughout, in the chat, that is. If you know of ways in which seaweed contributes to the SDGs under review at this HLPF, please post those in the chat. We want to hear from you, noting which SDG you're seeing, and if possible, which target and which indicator. With that, without further ado, Chantaline, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nichola. Good morning, distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen, partners. It's a real pleasure for UN Trade and Development to co-host this timely event with the Global Seaweed Coalition, the World Bank, the Aquatic Blue Food Coalition, and the UN Global Compact. I'm Chantal Carpentier. I'm the head of Trade, Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainable Development branch at UNCTAD. You may wonder how seaweed fits in this year's high-level political forum team, as Nichola mentioned. And the purpose of this session is actually to demonstrate why seaweed cannot simply be seen as a niche, but rather as a transformative lever to advance the three dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, the environmental, and the social. Seaweed is a versatile marine microalga. It is increasingly gaining recognition for its multifaceted contribution to poverty reduction, SDG 1, food security, SDG 2, and climate action, SDG 13. And this is all done in partnership through SDG 17, and thus can help us effectively deliver sustainable, resilient, and innovative solutions. Seaweed is a wonder of nature. And we've demonstrated that in our Ocean of Opportunities report that my dear colleague, David Vivas, that is on the screen now, co-authored. We have consumed it as food since prehistorical time, particularly in Asia, being eaten as food in the form of soup, snacks, fish preparation, such as sushi, and indigenous communities around the world have accumulated a vast knowledge around its harvesting and use. But the uses of seaweed today go much beyond. It is currently being used as human food complement, such as agar, as a natural industrial ingredient, as animal feed, as fertilizer, for cosmetic, and as non-plastic substitutes, such as for paper, textile, and even biofuel production. The global market for seaweed has more than tripled over the last 2 decades, growing from 5 billion to 17 billion, with global import representing about 1.2 billion of this. International trade in seaweed and its byproduct only represent 14% of these total market value, showing a significant potential for sunrise industrial development and new global supply side partnership, especially for developing countries. Seaweed can significantly improve sustainable livelihood for small-scale farmers and harvesters while mitigating climate change. Seaweed offers significant opportunity to end poverty, as I already mentioned, by allowing for production and income diversification, new business activities and opportunities for production and income diversification, new local employment, ultimately empowering women, youth, and indigenous people in coastal communities of developing countries. In many developing countries, seaweed cultivation and processing are complementary economic activity, as many male fishers go to the sea, while many women engage in the seaweed business to add to the family income and food security. Seaweed has become increasingly fashionable as a plant-based material and input that can contribute to end hunger, as it can be produced and cultivated in any ocean and sea, and even ex situ. There's an increased demand for vegetarian meal from many consumers due to its nutritional value in terms of iodine, polyphenols, carotenoids, and omega-3 fatty acid, among others. In Asia and Africa, they have started to use the seaweed as a food complement in meal for children due to its nutritional values. Seaweed is the sea farming activity with the lowest environmental impact in cultivation, as it does not need fresh water, fertilizer, or land in production. And on top of it, it absorbs carbon and can filter water systems. Many developing countries can expand seaweed cultivation by making use of marine spatial planning and integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. The beauty of this approach is basically a closed production circuit, zero waste, circularity, lower cost, and output diversification. We can also see that seaweed can contribute to global climate action due to its wide range of environmental impact, from biodiversity enhancement to deacidification and reoxygenation of surrounding waters. Seaweed has increasingly been receiving attention in sustainability and environmental conservation, and scientists, and you'll hear from some of them, have been calling for inclusion of seaweed in conservation frameworks. However, our latest report on ocean opportunities is calling for the inclusion of seaweed calling for more case studies and data and more policy attention to demonstrate how seaweed cultivation as well as restoration of kelp forests can positively and effectively contribute to climate action without causing unintended environmental and social impact. Of course, in this regard, member states' financial support could help accelerate progress. In summary, and after all this exciting overview, what can we do to increase sustainable seaweed growth in a way that benefits people and the planet? Well, let me give you just a few, and then I'm sure throughout this session, we're going to hear much more options. First, we can encourage government to incorporate seaweed into national development, biodiversity, and climate mitigation plan. We can advocate for the definition and harmonization of seaweed standard and related food and non-food product safety and security regulation. We can conduct research on various aspects of seaweed, such as carbon sequestration potential, biodiversity risk, nutritional benefit, and multiple sustainable use. We can encourage the development of seaweed-based food, nutraceutical, cosmetic, pharmaceutical, and non-plastic substitute as new green and inclusive business opportunities for developing countries and among women in vulnerable coastal communities. And finally, we can promote training, associativity, venture, and access to credit for sustainable seaweed farming and aquaculture under social and solidarity approach, for which we have a resolution in the UN General Assembly right now. So with this, Nichola, floor is open and back to you.
Thank you so much, Chantaline. And it was really my pleasure and privilege to contribute to that report that you mentioned as the lead author. And I really appreciate the way that you have highlighted that seaweed is so much more than just a niche market. So thank you for shedding light on that. Thank you for shedding light on its growing importance in global trade and the many, many ways in which it can be used. Now, let's turn to our keynote speaker, Dr. Kyoung Hwang. The floor is yours.
Okay. Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to talk to you in this meeting. Today, I'm going to talk about challenges and opportunities through seaweed cultivation in Korea. This is a well-summarized figure, how the seaweed production and utilization contributes to advancing a number of UN SDGs. Seaweed farming is becoming important as a source of jobs and economics in the world. Ecosystem service of seaweed provide a source of food and natural products across a range of industries. Therefore, scaling up seaweed aquaculture is imperative to accommodate more than 9 billion people in 2050. World seaweed production continues to rise, and Korea is the world's third largest producer. Between 2000 to 2018, the growth rate of the world was 6.2% per year. But in Korea, it was 9.4% per year. It was bigger than the world rate. Seaweed farming, Korea is the third producer of the world seaweed productions, and we have seaweed resources in nature. So it is more than 1,000 species, and there are more than 10 cultural species. In quantity, Saccharina is top species, and Pyrophia is the most important in value aspect. The Pyrophia exports recorded 6 times increase during the last decade. In the long history, seaweed cultivation technology has been developed quite well in Korea. In the development of cultivation method and technologies for each species, convenience and economy were emphasized. Because the culture method is too difficult, farmers, they cannot use those methods. For sustainable productions, Korean government restrict the density of cultivation facilities, manage farm environment in the rating systems, and monitors food safety. Recent changes of seaweed industry could be summarized here. Species diversity has been increased. The three major species are same, but various species have been included, such as Eclonia. Cultivation techniques have been developed to maximize natural productivity and to reduce labor cost. Automation facilities proliferated to support fisheries communities and to help aging population and declining households. Seaweed companies becoming specialized and large-scaled. As awareness of sustainable farming is growing, many seaweed companies are interested in obtaining certification following seaweed standard. We have had old and new challenges over the past 7 decades. However, the biggest challenge is climate change. The opportunity is to select our target species suitable for our environment. The success of Korean seaweed industry is the result of the integration of domestic breed development, aquaculture, and processing technology, and accumulated know-how, and it will continue to develop in the future. For a sustainable seaweed industry, it is necessary to establish a foundation for a virtuous cycle of the seaweed industry and to take active policies and legislation from the government. In 2016, the Fisheries Seed Industry Promotion Act was enacted. In other words, the concept of seed was expanded to fisheries, animals, and plants by the law for promotion of seaweed industry. We needed seaweed breeding to face climate changes, to grow fisheries income, and to supply stable biomass for other industries. There are 7 seaweed biobanks in Korea. NIFS is the largest biobank of them. These biobanks provide materials needed for seaweed breeding, as well as for seaweed researches in various scientific areas. Korea introduced aquatic plant variety protection systems to seaweed since 2012. This is the procedure of gaining APVP registration. The essential requirements for breed of seaweed is distinctness, uniformity, and stability, so-called DUS. It takes 5 to 7 years from strain development and registration. After registration, you can sell your varieties to farmers with protection. The APVP system provides an objective process for protecting intellectual property rights for new seaweed varieties in Korea. The total number of registered seaweed varieties with APVP in Korea, it is 32, which is more than 24 in China and 15 in Japan. The use of domestic seed in seaweed industry increased significantly from 60% in 2012 to 95% in 2022. The reason is that it developed excellent seaweed varieties have greatly contributed to increasing the proportion of domestic varieties. The Korean government promoted R&D projects such as Golden Seed Project. Various variety of seaweed have been produced through these projects, and it has been contributed to the production increase. In addition, we are established the coastal CO2 removal belt, forming marine forest for mitigation and adaptation against global warming. It is going along with the government's zero carbon policy in 2050. With climate change, natural disasters commonly happen quite well. Korean government developed policy insurance. This insurance is 50% of insurance premium is being subsidized and compensated for damage in the event of a natural disaster. The natural disaster includes typhoons, tsunamis, storms, red tides, and abnormal environmental change. Currently, 4 major seaweed species are eligible for the policy insurance. With the implementation of this insurance, damage to fishermen was greatly reduced. The ASC-MSC seaweed standard is used as a common standard for sustainable, environmentally, and socially responsible seaweed production. Korea has the largest number of acquisitions of this certification in the world. We have 17. With the government's eco-friendly aquaculture policy, the number of certification recipients is gradually increasing now. This is the take-home messages. Seaweed can contribute directly or indirectly to 14 UN SDGs. Korea has successful experience in the seaweed industry. To achieve this success, the Korean government provided a variety of support, including establishment of legislative systems, financial support, R&D support, and policy insurance. Korea currently exports seaweed to more than 120 countries around the world, and the export goal for 2030 is $1 billion. As the only national seaweed institute in Korea, Seaweed Research Institute, NIFS, conduct R&D, solve problems of culture farms, and cooperated closely with domestic and international organizations. Thank you so much for your listening.
Thank you. That was terrific. Really appreciate your presentation. It's really clear that Korea's success in the sector is due to a deliberate, mindful approach. The government has thoughtfully turned its policy action to support research and various other stages in the value chain. And we do think that other countries could learn a lot of lessons from Korea. And we might hear a little bit about how that could happen a bit later on. Now, the last time I checked, we didn't have any questions for you. There was a comment, though, from Anne Rudy, who would like to see policy and licensing to allow for community-based ocean farming with infrastructure and support to ensure environmentally sound cultivation, so that cultivation is supported to encourage fishers and local communities as small-scale ocean farmers to be included in the seaweed economy. So I think that that's a general comment, but An, would you like to react to that? What kind of support does the government provide to smallholders?
Smallholders.
The smaller producers.
All right. Because there are many small householders in the fisheries villages, right? But in the they have a kind of a union, fisheries union. They can form in the that areas. So governments they can support that the unions.
Excellent, thank you. Let me just check to see if in the room we have any questions. I'm seeing a lot of people looking down at their papers right now. It's a lot to absorb. Saba, you look like you might have a question.
I don't have a question. I'm very impressed by the policy initiative of actually subsidizing something useful like 50% of the insurance. So that's brilliant. So no question.
Thank you. And if there are any follow-up questions, note that we're going to be posting this presentation. You'll have a chance to go through it in more detail because necessarily she had to really fly over some really important details. But just want to underscore the importance of Korea as a producer and as a model for how governments can support the sector. If there aren't any questions now, I was giving a little bit more time for people potentially, and not seeing any more questions now. So it remains for me on behalf of all the organizers to thank you again for a really terrific presentation, and expect lots of questions coming to you afterwards. That's what I would imagine. So thank you so much. 감사합니다.
Thank you.
I hope I got that almost right. All right. Thank you so much. So now let's turn to the video from Dalila Al-Qadiri. So our colleagues are going to load that up, please. Always takes a little bit of time to transition. Here we go. Almost? Yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to address the UN High-Level Political Forum. I thank the Global Seaweed Coalition for inviting me. For the European Union, developing an algae industry sustainably would mean having valuable products, creating thousands of quality jobs in coastal areas, and possibly inspiring other industries to become equally innovative and socially exemplary. Hence our 2022 initiative that approaches the European Union algae sector in a cross-cutting, holistic way. It not only supports algae cultivation and production throughout the European Union, but it aims at developing the markets for algae products, both food and non-food. And right now, to implement the 23 policy actions the algae initiative contains, we are working closely with member state authorities, other services, industry, scientific institutions, academia, and NGOs. We interface with them through a collaborative stakeholder platform of ours that we call EU for Algae. And nearly 1,000 stakeholders have signed up. It is open access, so if you want to join, you will access information on funding opportunities, social media campaigns, events, projects, business-related intelligence, best practices, and much more. But one of the bottlenecks preventing the sector to develop is the fact that consumers do not know and therefore do not accept algae products, which is why last year, together with the Global Seaweed Coalition, the French government, and the Prince Albert Foundation, we held the very first EU Algae Awareness Summit in Paris. By showcasing success stories in the European Union and in the world, and by allowing people to test algae products for themselves, we wanted to raise awareness among the public and inspire European Union authorities to act. We are also helping European Union national authorities to streamline the allocation of licenses of sea space for growing algae and to include the activity in their national strategies. The European Commission is making sure that algae are adequately covered by various European Union funding instruments. For example, the Maritime Fund, but also Horizon Europe and the EU mission Restore Our Ocean Waters, the Circular Bio-Based Europe Joint Undertaking, the EIT Food, or the EIT Climate Kick. We facilitate access to these opportunities by placing them regularly on the EU for Algae website. But public funding can only get us so far. Our Blue Best Invest initiative provides investment readiness and fundraising support for early stage businesses, SMEs and scale-ups that bring innovative solutions to the blue economy. And last year, we held a Blue Invest pitching session dedicated to the agri sector, and another one is going to take place later this year. In sum, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but also an arsenal of tools and resources to tap into. So thank you for continuing to work together, and thank you for your attention.
And huge thanks to Nichola. Now, we've heard from a government and the way that it's supporting the sector. We've just heard from a regional organization and how it is in a very different way looking to encourage its member governments to support the sector. And when I say in a very different way, Korea is well ahead, but Europe is looking to grow. We're shortly going to hear about the US. But before that, just want to reiterate that we were absolutely delighted to work with the Commission on that that very first EU Algae Summit, and we look forward to many, many more. All right, it's time now to do that deep dive that we were promising you on how seaweed is going to, or has the potential to, and already is, helping to achieve the goals under review at this HLPF. That is goals 1, 2, 13, 16, and 17. So first for that, we're going to hear from a researcher, a research scientist. So Dr. Lori Hoffman. Lori, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nichola. Can you all hear me okay? No?
Very well.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. I didn't hear anything. All right, so I will share my screen. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. I'm honored to be here to talk to you about the importance of seaweed resource centers, also known as germplasm banks, and how they can contribute to SDG 2, zero hunger. So if you're thinking about, gene banks and what a gene bank is, you're probably thinking of a seed bank. And when you think of seed banks, you're thinking about land plants. And what do seed banks do for land plants? They preserve biodiversity. And this is, of course, an essential infrastructure to our modern day agricultural society. So they provide access and insurance to our modern agricultural practices. But if we think about seaweed germplasm banks and what they do for seaweed, we can look a little bit more closely. So by conserving seaweed biodiversity, we ensure the accessibility of seaweed strains to everyone. So this includes researchers, but also, most importantly, in this case, producers and farmers. It also supports selective breeding programs and restoration programs. And so the impact, actually, of these seaweed germplasm banks is multiple fold. And so it can contribute to food security, and to scaling up the European macroalgal industry, but also to nature conservation by restoring destructed ecosystems, and also to scientific innovation by providing strains for finding potential novel algae-based foods and products. So, of course, we already have germplasm banks where seaweed strains and seaweed species are preserved. But at the moment, they are quite small and quite scattered. And we don't have a seaweed resource center or a germplasm bank that only focuses on seaweeds. So in order to really assess how seaweed germplasm banks can contribute to the SDGs, first we looked at the targets. So target 2.5, for example, which focuses on maintaining genetic diversity to promote access to and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resources. And the main indicator for this target is basically the number of plant and animal genetic resources for food and aquaculture that are in conservation facilities. Notice that seaweed is not included in this indicator. So we tried to find out how are seaweed germplasm banks currently contributing based on these indicators. And so first we looked at all of the seaweed strains that we currently have in our European germplasm banks, and we created this geographical map of all of the seaweed strains. So you can see each dot on the map represents a seaweed strain, and the different colors represent the different germplasm banks. And in the interactive version of this map, if you hover on one of these points, you get all the data that are associated with the strain. But if we dig deeper into the seaweed germplasm banks in Europe, for example, in this case, we found that we have about 2,300 strains in total, 74% of which are brown seaweed, so this includes the big kelps. Then we have about 12% of red seaweeds, and this includes, for example, nori that we know from our sushi rolls, and 14% of green seaweeds. And that sounds pretty nice, but when we think about the global biodiversity of seaweeds, which includes about 11,000 known species, actually we only make a small dent, and it only represents about 5% of the global biodiversity. And we also know that several commercially important species that are used for food and food applications are not yet secured in European germplasm banks because they're mainly harvested from the wild. So we certainly need to secure more seaweed strains in germplasm banks, especially commercially important species that are used for food and food applications in order to significantly contribute to the SDG 2. And we can certainly start by following in the footsteps of agriculture and land-based plants. So for land-based plants, there's already an international and legal framework that supports these seed banks. And so for seaweeds, we can do the same thing. We need a more coordinated and centralized effort to support the access and equitable sharing of seaweed genetic resources. And I would argue that the impact of seaweed germplasm banks will not only contribute if we do these things to increase food security and facilitating the scaling up of the European seaweed industry, but also, as I mentioned, to nature conservation and new biotechnical applications, none of which will be possible without having these very important infrastructures. So I thank you very much for your attention and your time.
Thank you very much, Lori. And I should have mentioned our connection with Lori comes about through our collaboration with the Global Crop Diversity Trust. The executive director sits on our strategic advisory council, as does Harrison, as do several other people who are part of this webinar. And so, Lori, one of my takeaways from this is for the audience, we promised you some surprises. I'm willing to bet that you weren't expecting that the first target we were going to point to was 2.5. And this is one of the features of seaweed. It is surprising the many, many ways in which it can contribute to sustainability, including these goals under review. And thank you also, Lori, for really neatly highlighting one of the problems that just dogs seaweed, which is that it doesn't get counted. There is this thinking in the food and agriculture space, the food system space, that in the Aquatic Blue Food Coalition and in the Global Seaweed Coalition, we're working to encourage governments, international institutions, other stakeholders to remember to incorporate those land and sea interlinkages, to remember to incorporate aquatic foods. And seaweed often doesn't fall neatly even into aquatic foods because its uses go beyond food. So it's often not on the radar. We need you, the interested people in seaweed, to raise these concerns so that seaweed's actually counted. All right, off soapbox, on to next panelist. Thank you so much, Lori. We're going to come back to a Q&A, so please keep adding those questions in the chat. We saw that there's already at least one. I'm going to turn now to Runa, who is joining us live from the airport.
Thank you so much, Nichola, and it's an absolute honor to be here with the Global Seaweed Coalition and the United Nations Center for Trade and Development. Fellow panelists and the audience who's gathered here, I'm Runa Ray, I'm a fashion environmentalist, and I try working around seaweed and the SDGs. So without further ado, I would like to start the video and speak about how seaweed can contribute towards SDG 1, and that is improving livelihoods and decreasing poverty to improve resilience. So the fashion industry, as we know it, right, it contributes to an immense amount of climate change. And here you see cotton. And I can say with great confidence that what we eat is basically competing with what we wear. Cotton, for example, takes up large tracts of land, uses a lot of pesticides, and well as water for its processing. But you also have the leather industry with its chromium dyes and harmful chemicals that not just leach onto the land, but also cause cancer and other environmental issues that are non-reversible. So it is time for us to make a change in the fashion industry. And one of those ways is to work with recycled materials such as cellulose and seaweed, wherein old garments and yarn can be reintroduced as recycled cellulose, and seaweed can be a part of that mixture to create new textiles. And in this case, I have been creating leather. So the seaweed leather doesn't depend on land for its growth. It works on using invasive seaweed, invasive microalgae, and recycled cellulose. So basically, with this leather, we are creating new coastal incomes. We are cleaning up the coasts. We are teaching communities new professions in the fashion industry. We are moving away from water pollution, which is caused by cotton or leather. It uses only recycled water. We are not using any harsh chemicals, and the product is resilient, can also double up as a bioplastic, and therefore in fashion, we are seeing seaweed that is seeking to improve the livelihoods of people and not competing with their land or food. The second SDG that I would like to speak about is SDG 2 and 13, which is basically trying to double up agricultural produce and speaking about climate change. What you see here is the blue-green algae, HABs, which are formed because of human-based activity. Seaweed can come to the rescue, where you can use seaweed as a coagulant and splash the inks on the surface, spread the fabric on it. It basically negates water wastage and water wastage and water pollution, because it's basically seaweed. You have the inks that are transferred onto the surface, and I myself printed 250 yards of fabric using only 50 gallons of water. So the women that I worked with to collect the tarragonene were from a coastal town in South India called Mandapam, and they basically harvested these seaweeds from the rock. And it was possible to do that because seaweed, again, requires minimal resources to grow. We're using the invasive ones, we're using the ones that are harvested by these women at the coastal communities. It's completely eco-friendly in the printing technique, and of course, it's one of the great ways to combat climate change, which is caused because of pesticides and the dyeing industry. We're also teaching the women this technique, so we are creating new income streams. The other SDG that I like to speak about is SDG 16, which is to do with peace, one of my favorite SDGs. We see a lot of overfishing that's happening. We see people struggling right now. There's a lot of illegal shell harvests that are coming up because you need to compensate for what you are not getting from the ocean. So what can seaweed do? It can team up with another very important aspect of the fashion industry, and that is pearl or oyster cultivation. I mean, I've heard a lot of scientists who speak about the multi-trophic integrated sea aquaculture. And this is something which I found really interesting, because if we could use seaweed extensively in the fashion industry, and also with pearls being a rare occurrence because of the climate change and the pollution, we would find innovative ways that seaweed could basically reduce conflict that is due to reduced marine resources, help change land-based activities, and also contribute to cleaner waters, and create a cross collaboration that could work with other industries to create synergies for a common cause, and that could be of goodwill and peace for humanity. So I would like to end this with a small little video of a few minutes to show you the seaweed printing that was done and that was showcased. And to show you the true potential of seaweed, not just in science, but also in fashion and design. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Runa. That was terrific. And again, I hope that some of you were surprised to see how seaweed could be used in ways that might be unexpected. And you touched, Runa, on goals 1 to 13 and 16 in a very short, very efficient presentation. So your invaluable on the ground and, dare I say, in the sea experience speaking with the women producers, we might have some questions. I hope we have some questions about their experience. Harrison and I were exchanging glances about, we saw the way that they have to protect their fingers. So be interesting to hear from you about safety issues that you've seen on the ground. It's also great to see that you're producing leather out of seaweed and the way that you reduce significantly the water that's used in the dyeing process. So, and you also picked up on IMTA, Integrated Multi-Trophic Aquaculture, that we heard Chantal speak about at the beginning. And we in the Global Seaweed Coalition are very strong advocates of IMTA as a way of helping to diversify livelihoods. Because in short, IMTA, you're producing seaweed with other products like mollusks, like finfish, and you're able to use the wastes from one thing that you're producing to feed another thing that you're producing. So it's a nice closed system. So huge thanks, Runa. Tee up questions for Runa, either in the room or in the chat. And now we are going to go to our third panelist, and then we'll have a Q&A after we hear from Anushka. But thanks so much, Runa, for sharing your pioneering work in fashion and the in-depth work that you've been doing interviewing women seaweed producers in India. All right, now over to the chair of the Global Seaweed Coalition's Strategic Advisory Council, Anushka Concepcion. Anushka, after sharing a brief overview of the seaweed sector in the US, is going to discuss each of the goals under review. Anushka, over to you.
Thank you very much, and many thanks to my fellow speakers for their innovative and fascinating presentations. It's always great to hear about what's happening all over the world. In my presentation, I hope to add just a few more points to what was already mentioned. So just a little bit about seaweed farming in the United States. I take this opportunity to talk about the US. As you can see from this graphic, seaweed production by volume pales in comparison to Asia. However, as the number of small-scale seasonal farmers continues to increase annually, the potential for the US to contribute to the global seaweed sector is huge. Now, I'd like to focus on the following SDGs under review at this high-level political forum, which includes some examples from the US as well as globally. So I want to start off with SDG 1, how seaweed can meet this goal. So really it's by ensuring that women and Indigenous communities have equal access to funding and other resources, so they have the opportunity to contribute to the sector in an equitable way. And it's also ensuring that marine tenure rights for Indigenous communities, for example, enable them to continue utilizing these resources as they have for generations. And these are conversations that are occurring in the US right now in regards to siting of seaweed farms and other aquaculture crops. Seaweed is also a mechanism, as was also mentioned by other presenters, for seasonal fisheries to diversify in their operations or to transition altogether. And really, it's a way for them to become financially resilient as well as adaptive in the face of climate change and resulting environmental shocks. Now, moving on to SDG 2. For example, in the US, one of the priorities of the federal government is to reduce the reliance on imports and increase food security. The US imports 90% of its seafood, and seaweeds make up a large component of that number. So really, seaweeds is a great candidate to meet the federal government's goal. Seaweeds contain several nutrients that can prevent chronic diseases, leading to healthier communities. And they're a good source of biostimulants, which leads to reduced use of man-made fertilizers while increasing agricultural productivity overall. Seaweeds can also be produced in an environmentally responsible way. And this is really important because it's through, for example, in the US, very strict permitting and siting processes, which involve federal, state, and local agencies, which can encourage a reduction in potential negative impacts to ecosystems while still producing very valuable, high quality crop. And also just wanted to hit home really the importance of what Dr. Hoffman presented on, what is that there are several efforts underway to ensure equitable access to genetically diverse seed. And some of these efforts, as was mentioned, is supported and has been supported by the Global Seaweed Coalition's call for proposals. Moving on to SDG 13. Some statistics for you. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency states that methane is more than 28 times as potent as carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere. And of course, greenhouse gases are a driver of climate change. So therefore, finding ways to reduce the amount of input of this greenhouse gas into the atmosphere is paramount. There are some species of seaweeds, like Asparagopsis and others, that can be used as an additive in cattle feed to reduce methane emissions from livestock production by almost 80%. It's a huge number. Seaweed farming can be incorporated into national strategic and adaptation plans, as we learned in Dr. Hwang's presentation. And for example, the Global Seaweed Coalition recently awarded the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, which is a government agency in Samoa, to unlock the potential of their blue economy and create sustainable employment opportunities for their people. So that's great examples, as Dr. Hwang had demonstrated, and also what is happening in Samoa, ways that governments can really engage to support incorporating more seaweed related efforts into their activities. And as Chantal mentioned, seaweeds can also be used as alternative to carbon intensive and petroleum-based materials, also as Runa had also demonstrated, in products like biofuels, biotextiles, biopackaging, like the products produced, as you see on the screen here, by NOTPLA, by Plastic Alternatives. However, it's really important to ensure that funding to continue further research and scale up of these products and these uses are available. Seaweed can serve as a conduit to form, for example, a Global Seaweed Institute, which could serve as a clearinghouse for global coordination and collaboration to address emerging needs of the sector. And emerging needs can include things like research, data collection, and even policy harmonization. However, it would need to be appropriately financed. That's a call, appropriately financed to be effective, and not to mention should be accountable and transparent. Again, some more statistics. Over 1 million smallholders produce seaweed in Indonesia and other nations like the Philippines. So decision-making should be inclusive, responsive, participatory, and representative of those smallholders. And with the beneficial resources seaweeds provide, seaweeds can empower underserved groups like women in Tanzania and in Thailand to take on leadership and representative roles in the policy, regulatory, and other decision-making opportunities. And another example of a project that the Global Seaweed Coalition has funded was seaweed food safety training in Tanzania for women that are producing seaweeds, but also provides them additional employment opportunities to process seaweeds as well. So these are some examples, again, of efforts that are occurring globally to help support the sector. And finally, just to reiterate some amazing points and really fantastic critical points that were made in the other presentations, is forming global and multi-stakeholder partnerships. These are essential for the sector to scale up safely and sustainably. So, for example, to achieve target 17.1, there may be opportunities to bring seaweed production into the formal sector and including it in value-added tax systems. Again, examples were provided by previous speakers. Providing support to the sustainable scale-up of the seaweed sector could help developed countries achieve target 17.2 which is helping them to fully implement their official development assistance commitments or ODA commitments that they have. Also, mobilizing additional financial resources for developing countries from multiple sources could be a way to achieve target 17.3. For example, for target 17.6, which is regional and international cooperation on access to science, technology and innovation, knowledge sharing on mutually agreed terms, can include improving coordination among existing mechanisms, perhaps like at the United Nations level, and through a global technology facilitation mechanism to meet this particular target. And really quickly, I know I'm running out of time, but target 17.16 and 17.17, which is a pathway forward, could be to establish a multi-stakeholder partnership at the global level that can mobilize and share knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources. Seaweed can help countries encourage and promote effective public and public-private, as well as civil society partnerships. And finally, just to wrap it up, 17.18, target 17.18, enhancing capacity building support to developing countries and small island developing states. This can significantly increase the availability of high quality, timely, and reliable data disaggregated by factors, including things like income and gender and race, just to name a few, that are relevant in national contexts. So really, over the past few years, the Global Seaweed Coalition and many others have done what they could to address some of these targets through awarding of projects and other types of support. However, there is much more to be done, and I'm sure my fellow panelists would agree with me. So I'd just like to summarize by saying, we challenge you to bring your great ideas for achieving these targets that were discussed in this high-level political forum to the table. And so that's something I ask of all of you. And I thank you for your time, and I look forward to the discussion to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anushka. Oh, listen to that. We got applause in the room. And that's really well deserved. Thank you for going through all of the 5 SDGs under review. And just a couple of takeaways are really glad that you reiterated the multiple ways in which it could support goal number 16. Again, I hope that's one of those little surprises for people that seaweed can be a contributor to goal number 16. And all of the others. Also want to pick up on your point about the need for a coordination mechanism and for partnership at the global level, which the Global Seaweed Coalition provides, but the financing point that you raised is a really important point. That's what I'll say on that. The importance for goal 17 of strengthening national capacity to both produce and analyze the data. As an economist, when I first looked at seaweed data, I will tell you that it set my hair on fire. So there has been an awful lot of energy in the chat. We really appreciate it. There's lots of comments there. Interest in the Arctic, which is very interesting. Thank you so much, Loretta Robertson, who is a member of the Global Seaweed Coalition's Scientific Advisory Council. She pointed out that seaweed can help to achieve goal 3, improved health, which is one of the points that we're raising as well. And in fact, just wanted to flag, we've got some of the leading global experts on seaweed in this event, as well as people who point out, hey, I'm new to seaweed, and this is a great kind of event for us. So really appreciate that. Let me ask a follow-up question of our panelists. So Anushka, you mentioned financing. So let me set the scene. According to the World Bank produced a report last year which says trillions, let me repeat that, trillions of dollars are wasted on subsidies for agriculture, fishing, and fossil fuels. These could be used to help address climate change, but instead they generate damaging outcomes for people and for our planet. The total, if you look at direct government expenditures in these sectors, and you consider the costs on people and the planet from pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, road congestion, and the destruction of nature, ultimately resulting from these subsidies, comes to an eye-watering $6 trillion every year. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. $6 trillion in unproductive subsidies every year. So, dear panelists, for some time now, we at the Global Seaweed Coalition have been urging policymakers to redirect just a portion of these funds. Not all would be great, but it's actually not what we need. Just a portion of these funds to support the seaweed sector. So panelists, what if they actually did redirect those funds? If there were a large infusion of funds into the global seaweed sector, what are the top priorities that could be tackled with such a windfall? What would be the impact of it? Let's go in the order that you presented. Lori, over to you first.
Yeah, sure, Nichola. Thanks for the opportunity to respond. So I'll tackle this more from a European perspective because we have a very diverse panel here, and then I'm sure everyone else will have their own perspectives. But I mean, I think we can all agree that there's a lot of work to be done, which Anushka already mentioned. But one of the things that we really need to invest in is technology, particularly in Europe, for scaling up the macroalgal sector, the production of macroalgae for food and other industries, you know, especially make up for the high cost of labor that we have here in Europe, which is really limiting the success of seaweed farms at the moment. But also in terms of automation processes for processing of the seaweed biomass. So a lot needs to be invested in technology, but also in education. I mean, I think we are part of the process now of changing the narrative. But in Europe, you know, as was already mentioned, seaweed is not that well accepted as a food product. And so we have to change that narrative, and I think we are already doing that. And I think we all feel the momentum that seaweed currently has on the global stage. And so I think we're really going in the right direction there. Outreach as well, that also goes into that, but I want to applaud the EU Algae Initiative. That's a great start, and also the EU Algae Awareness Summit. That is great, and these are the kind of events that are really gonna help change the narrative. And of course, I have to bring it back to the germplasm banks, which I just presented. I mean, these are infrastructures that are essential, kind of at the base of the industry, and they can be expensive to maintain. They need a lot of expert knowledge to maintain, and I think that we just need to support them and make sure that they are supported. And also to increase to, as I mentioned, make a more coordinated and comprehensive effort to, at the European and also at the global scale, which the Global Seaweed Coalition is now doing, to, you know, put seaweed on the stage, seaweed as a food product, and to create this international and legal framework to support, you know, seaweed genetic resources to be used for food. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Lori. Let's turn to Runa. Same question.
Thank you, Nichola. Great question. I can speak to you from my angle, and it's from the fashion side. So when I was working with the seaweed farmers, one thing I figured out was you have two types. One was like the indigenous women, I mean, the indigenous people who dive into the seaweed that grows on the rock, and the others who farm the seaweed, which are done on the rafts. And what they did tell me was that they have, interestingly, they have been using this one strain that was given to them by Pepsi in the 1980s, and they have been growing that ever since. They said they haven't been given new stock of seaweed, so they've just been processing the seaweed for the past 40 years. Another aspect that I found out is when they are harvesting the seaweed or even growing it, when you're talking about the rafts, there's a lot of, because of human activity, you have the harmful algae blooms, which also comes and kills the seaweed. So they're struggling with that aspect. So if we're talking about an influx of money coming in, it could probably help restore the coastal ecosystems and help give these people alternative trades, which I'm talking about from the fashion industry in terms of a collaborative influx. But at the same time, it would be great if we could also use this money, again, talking from the fashion aspect, where we could help regulate the kind of flow that happens from the seaweed into textiles. Because fashion, as we know, has always struggled with greenwashing and the lack of transparency. And we don't want seaweed to come in as the next new fast fashion. So money is really, really important. I see that it really helps the indigenous people and the indigenous folk. It would create an avenue where they can improve their livelihoods and at the same time help the fashion industry in being more transparent.
Great, thank you, Runa. And Anushka, over to you.
Thank you, Nichola. Just agree with everything that both Dr. Hoffman, what Lori has, and what Runa has mentioned. I also wanted to add, just overall sustainable agriculture, raw material production, and doing whatever we can to support that sort of scale up, but also infrastructure, supporting the development and maintenance of infrastructure, as well as to support the scale up, more responsible and sustainable scale up of the sector overall. And also like to add standards of some sort to, every state, for example, in the US, has their own, sort of standards, if they have standards or regulations. And so some sort of global harmonization, not to say that adaptation, but some sort of agreement or alignment would be really, really helpful, I think, as the sector scales up.
Excellent, thank you. So let me just, my takeaways, and this is for Harrison, just in case the World Bank is going to do a call to action at the end of this event. What we heard, at least what I heard, was that these funds could go to support improving the technology, strengthening education, changing the narrative, so supporting strong outreach about seaweed, improving the research, supporting gene banking efforts, the need for coordination comprehensively at the national and at the global levels, strengthening indigenous people's capacity, whether it's through providing high quality seeds and to help strengthen their livelihoods, and an important call to avoid greenwashing. We often hear in our work on seaweed, not just avoid greenwashing, but avoid hype. And so what we try to do at the Global Seaweed Coalition is to ensure that what we're saying is very much grounded in science. And as a testimony to that, we have many leading seaweed experts, scientists on this event today. And finally, sustainable agriculture. Again, seaweed is grown in the ocean, but it can contribute to improving the sustainability of agriculture through what Anushka referred to as biostimulants, and some of us might call fertilizer additives. So a more sustainable way to produce food and other crops on land. Finally, the importance of infrastructure. And again, something that the seaweed world has been crying out for quite some time is harmonizing standards at the global level. So that's what I heard from this. There may be more, but those are my quick takeaways for you, Harrison. And there's been a lot of energy in the chat. Let's do a quick round robin on other SDGs. Loretta, you already contributed with SDG 3. Anybody, let me check in the room. Has anybody been inspired to think about other SDGs that seaweed contributes to? Zina.
Thank you. The SDG 17 I thought was really interesting in the sense of awareness and partnership. So one of the questions I had was, how do we engage the creative industries and also the technology sector around innovation to be able to identify ways to support the increase of purchasing capacity and finance based on the fact that there is more focus on the UN Sustainable Development Goals in business as they align them to their ESG focus. So just interested to hear more about that.
Great question, Zina. I think that's for Runa, but I'm also going to invite Anushka to come in on this. How do we engage the creative industries? So Runa first. If you heard the question, I hope you heard the question. You're muted. Need you to unmute, Runa. There we go.
Well, that's an interesting question when you're talking about the creative industry and how heightened you felt when it comes to seaweed. I think there has to be a lot of consolidation which is required, and this is when you talk about cross collaboration that happens within different industries coming together and trying to see how we could basically narrow it down. Because what I see is that everyone's kind of working separately, but if it could kind of come together with the information technology, showing us basically the amount that is used and the amount that is wasted, especially in the fashion industry, that could help reduce a lot of waste that we generate and the pollution and the water. And even when people ask me as to how the leather is made, there's a lot of water that is used, but we recycle a lot of water. So if we have like a way to consolidate all this data, I think that would be a great help when it comes to cross collaboration with fashion industry, seaweed.
Thank you, Runa. Anushka, any additional thoughts? And I just want to add a little point on this, but Anushka.
Just one additional thought. This has been conversations within the Global Seaweed Coalition, just a Global Seaweed Institute, just some sort of headquarters that can bring together experts from many different fields that it could sort of serve as a clearinghouse. I mean, that's one potential option, which could also needs financing and financial support to make it effective.
Point well worth reiterating. And we're at the Global Seaweed Coalition, we're really strong believers in the importance of engaging the creative sectors. In fact, we believe in the importance of, because there's so much received wisdom or siloed thinking, it helps to engage artistic and creative folks to help with the reframing as well. So reframing is really, really important to us. I'm seeing some energy now also around the other SDGs. I knew somebody was going to come up with it. Brian, you beat everybody to the punch. Of course, SDG 14, life underwater. Yes.
Just SDG 8. I'm thinking about the livelihoods piece. We've heard a lot about food safety. My organisation works on drowning prevention. We haven't heard a lot about occupational safety. So for seaweed in particular, obviously it's a water-based livelihood, and no one's really mentioned the risks that people are facing. We work with partners in many countries, including in Tanzania, which has been mentioned as well. In Zanzibar, the climate is forcing women to actually plant their seaweed in deeper water.
Yes.
And they're actually not able to swim.
Yeah.
So they're actually losing their livelihoods. So I don't think that's really come up, and I'm just really keen to hear about how occupational safety, water safety, drowning prevention fits into the agenda.
Well done. Our founding financier, Lloyd's Register Foundation, is delighted that you just said what you said. Our previous name was the Safe Seaweed Coalition. Indeed, we're founded on the notion of the safe and sustainable scale-up of the seaweed sector. And occupational safety is one of the dimensions, occupational safety, food safety, and why am I blanking on the environmental safety? Thank you. Excellent. And yes, that is really important to us as well. And in fact, in the UN paper on seaweed, the report on seaweed, one of our recommendations was indeed to strengthen safety. We included a recommendation to provide first aid training. Yeah. Because as we interviewed Anushka and others, and Runa and others contributed to that paper, as we interviewed women, we realized that there wasn't first aid training. It's basic, it gets overlooked. So seeing a hand raised here, David.
Thank you, Nichola. Sometimes the most obvious SDGs are sometimes forgotten, SDG 14, and so many targets. Target 1 on pollution, on plastic substitutes, target 2 on ecosystem restoration, target 7 on increased economic opportunities for small-scale producers and island states, SDG 14 on research and development, target 14.8, so it's all over. But just to mention something really important, we have a very important process next year in the road to the United Nations Conference on the Oceans. In the report of the UN Secretariat to the member states in the last consultation, seaweed was mentioned for the first time ever. We are organizing, it's there, I have the advanced copy. It's very important to mention that UNCTAD is organizing a fundamental milestone called the Oceans Forum on Trade-Related Aspects of SDG 14 in March next year to deal with all economic issues, to mainstream these type of recommendations into the declaration, voluntary commitments, and action points of the conference. So I would encourage everybody to participate in March and obviously in NIFS in June, but the political environment isn't going to change if there is a push to enhance the understanding of how seaweed can be a transformational vector for aquaculture, social and environmental sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're also seeing in the chat, Andrea, you mentioned SDG 6. If you can just post in the chat some additional thoughts. And I also want to flag SDG 5, gender. That's an important one. And 10, responsible production and consumption. Essentially, we believe that if you look carefully at the SDGs, seaweed can contribute to the achievement of each of them. This is the point that we wanted to make with this. We need to shift a little bit. We've seen a lot of energy in the chat. Really, really appreciate this. Let me just double check that there aren't any more burning questions or points in the room. Is that a hand? That looks like a hand. Okay, all right. Maybe you might want to come a little closer so the mic picks you up.
Hi, I'm Cassia.
We're good.
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm a student at the University of Michigan, and I just came back from an internship in Cameroon, and they do forestry conservation with women. So I was actually going to talk about SDG 5 because I think everyone mentioned that there are a lot of women in these spaces doing the farming themselves. So I was wondering how you go about expanding and implementing these projects, because this is something that I think could be really beneficial to people everywhere, including in Cameroon. So yeah, I want to hear more about how you start and what you would recommend for other organizations.
Very good, thank you. The quick answer from me is that the Global Seaweed Coalition has been providing seed financing of grants of 50,000 euros, which doesn't sound like a lot, except for smallholders. That's usually exactly what they need. So we've been providing that kind of grant. Let me see, Anushka, because we've got to give the lightning answer here, if you would like to say anything more from your vantage point, sharing our strategic group.
Thanks, Nichola, and that's a great question. I think really quickly to summarize, it's providing training support. So whether it's also seed money for establishing cooperatives, but it's providing the training for women to not only empower them, but to support their education on learning business skills, learning how to establish a cooperative, having them, exposed to providing resources so they can know the laws and regulations. So it's again, providing resources, many times free of charge, if that's possible, just so that they have the tools available to them to be successful long term. And many times women are the educators in our communities. And so supporting them in their efforts to continue to educate the next generation, because they are the ones that are doing everything in addition to the farming and the harvesting. But then again, giving them skills on food safety so that they can have additional opportunities, not just farming or harvesting, doing the processing, doing the marketing, the retail components of it, and being really, good businesswomen too.
So, thank you, Anushka. And indeed, women are also so often the primary food decision makers in the household. So educating them on the ways that seaweed can be used, on the benefits of seaweed, on how to prepare seaweed so that it best complements or contributes to the nutritional needs of the household. We need to wrap this segment up. I'm really, really happy to see all of this energy in the chat. Thank you, Radia, for pointing out the importance for people with disabilities who can benefit from this sector. Love it if you could develop that further. We'd love to see this conversation keep going. And please do that as we post the event online and we do our LinkedIn and other social media posts. Please keep the conversation going. We'd love to know your thoughts. It is now time, though, for us to hear about the World Bank's perspective. So just to tee that up, to fully achieve the potential that we've heard about today, we've certainly heard that the sector needs support on the policy and institutional front from local, subnational, national, regional governments, and importantly at the global level. So dedicated financial support, we've heard the many ways in which that could make a difference. So Harrison, what are the World Bank's takeaways and what can or should member states do?
Well, thanks a lot, Nichola. Really wonderful moderation, I should say. And I also want to thank all the participants. I think this has been a very wonderful time. I mean, I wish we had more time to discuss because there's a lot of energy around here. And so I think I'll just go ahead and give you a few of my thoughts about this. But before I do that, I would want to apologize for our global director at the World Bank, Environment, Natural Resources and Blue Economy, Valerie Hickey. You know, she's a lover of seaweed. She's not able to be here, but she sends her greetings. Secondly, I would like to thank, obviously, everybody who has participated in this, the organizers of this meeting. Has been really well done. And it has taken effort with quite a number of organizations that have participated. So I would really want to thank the team that is nameless from the UN Trade and Development, the UN Global Compact, the Global Seaweed Coalition, the Aquatic Blue Food Coalition, and obviously the World Bank has also been part of this organization. I also want to thank the excellent speakers, really excellent. Chantal, Delila, and Dr. Hwang, wonderful. Also our wonderful panelists, Lori, Runa, Anushka, and obviously I can't forget to thank you again, our excellent moderator, Nichola Dyer. Seaweed demonstrates how development, climate, and nature work together to generate value and uplift communities. We have seen, we have had it, we have even experienced it. Seaweed farming can help build a wonderful world free of poverty on a livable planet and has an enormous growth potential. And I think it's important that this forum thinks about how we can get, the benefits of that potential. The World Bank has been working on this for some time. In 2023, we launched the Global Seaweed New and Emerging Market Report that's funded by ProBlue, which is a multi-donor trust fund. It identifies 10 global seaweed markets with potential to grow the seaweed sector by an additional $11.8 billion by 2030. I think we have heard that these emerging markets are actually there and people are actually trying to make use of them. In relation to the UN SDGs, we have heard quite a lot has been spoken here, that seaweed is a major player as a source of jobs and economy and contribute to several SDGs. In fact, the moderator said they are all of them, but I'm also hearing that, from the Korean presenter, Dr. Hwang, 14 SDGs out of the 17, which is already a huge thing. And many people don't know these things. So the mindset change call, I think, is an important one as well. So in addition to the SDGs that we have reviewed today, we have quite had a number. I don't want to go there because it's a number of SDGs that we have already been mentioned. I had picked my few. I had taken SDG 5 on gender. Obviously, that is an important one because of the role of women in this work. I had picked SDG 7. I don't know if anybody mentioned that SDG 7. Because seaweed biomass can be used for production of ethanol, butanol, biogas, biodiesel, bio-oil, name it, hydrogen fuel, that is useful for clean energy. I have also picked SDG 9. I don't know anybody mentioned that. I didn't see it. This is about a source of sustainable and durable biomolecules for several industrial innovation and infrastructure that can be used for construction, packaging, and textiles. Life below water, I don't want to say, David said it and many others said it, so I don't want to go there. SDG 15 was mentioned, I believe, life on land. But here, seaweed production does not require land, so that is, it contributes to limitation. You know, it contributes in a way to ensure that we can conserve more land. And I mean, obviously, the other bit of its effect on agriculture is also important to think about. We have a challenge, obviously, that we have resources that are very stretched, and it is very important, therefore, that the world makes the most of seaweed, a resource that can swiftly be regenerated and has potential to regenerate and restore aquatic systems, and even restore land through biostimulants that have been mentioned here. So, in other words, I think we have also shown up SDG 17 about partnerships. The World Bank has been working quite closely with quite a number of partners in this area, including the ones that organize this, this conference, obviously, this side event. But also, for the last so many years, we have worked with South Korea, a country at the forefront of global seaweed production, and that provides the model for other governments that seek to expand into this sector. The Korea World Bank Group Partnership Facility, that's a funding facility, has granted a fund to this work that we are calling it the Korean Technology and Knowledge Transfer to transform the seaweed agribusiness in Africa and Southeast Asia countries. This is one of the very good collaboration that we want to see flourishing further and further. Obviously, the World Bank has also done quite a lot in terms of aquaculture in the last 2 years or so. We have a platform that I want to talk about, Aqua Invest platform, that has brought in a number of webinars and a lot of material that you can go and look at. I think something is in the chat already about this. You can click that and see what you can get out of that. Now, no problem. So now, yeah, I mean, this is exciting, and Nichola is telling me that I have less minutes than I thought. Okay, so what are we calling? What do we do? What is the call for action that we want to? I mean, I have a few points that I want to point out here quickly before we run out of time. Countries need to develop and implement competitive strategies. We have heard about this already throughout the value chain, production to marketing. This has not been happening much, but we have seen Korea doing a bit of that. And this is really important for us to learn that it can be done. We have also learned from the US what is happening there. The EU have also talked about making their countries to do strategies. I think this is really critical. Central to the seaweed revolution, that's what we call it at the bank, is ensuring that women and vulnerable coastal communities are supported to remain at the center of the seaweed development. This has been mentioned here very, very, and we want to emphasize it because of the role that women are playing in the development of seaweed. Women have even shown capacity to develop novel products all across, so it's very important. Promotion of R&D is very important, and this should incorporate seaweed international development, biodiversity, and climate mitigation plans. This, again, Korea, I mentioned it because one of the countries we have been working with. We want to see more countries doing bigger than that. Financing mechanisms, I must emphasize on this, such as blue bonds, carbon credits, nitrogen credits, green finance, and so on, can help us to reward blue investment for environmental benefits and ecosystem services. Japan is one country that has actually done quite a lot in ensuring that seaweed sequestration, carbon sequestration, becomes part of their national plan for reduction of emissions. The World Bank has shown, I mean, basically, funding should not be an issue we talk about, really. Because the World Bank has shown that through the detox development, repurposing environmental harmful subsidies, that we could repurpose the $7 trillion that are being used on seaweed, I mean on harmful subsidies. Those can be taken to seaweed. We have seen touches all the SDGs, why not? And then another thing that I want to mention very quickly, I think I have 1 minute less. Application of global seaweed standards is important. We have mentioned that a bit. I don't want to go into detail of that. But also important is that we need to remember that seaweed, from what I've heard here, is a kind of institutional orphan. What do? We need to develop international consortium or center of excellency, one center of excellence actually, that is dedicated to seaweed development, to do the things they have just mentioned, R&D, education, training of women, safety, whatever it is. We need that money. We need this center. To conclude, seaweed can help solve all the world's pressing environmental and social needs. The role of governments in realizing these benefits cannot be emphasized, but so is the role of the private sector. Indeed, each of us can play a role, be it in increasing the voices of speaking for seaweed, accelerating scientific knowledge, or simply increased use of seaweed products. This is what we have had. As Valerie would say, vive la seaweed revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harrison. Greatly appreciated, and really appreciate the call for a one-stop shop on seaweed. Our beloved yet institutional orphan. Thank you to everybody. You stole my thunder on the thank yous, but I am going to come back to them in a second. Just a quick promotional word. For those of you who are saying, I'd like to learn more about seaweed, please join. If you're not already members of the Global Seaweed Coalition, it's easy to join and it's free. Just go to our website. If it hasn't been posted already, Azadine is going to post a link in the chat and you can find a tab to become a member. So let me just add my voice to Harrison's in terms of thank yous. Thank you to each of the speakers who, Harrison's already named them, so I won't rename you, but just know that you have my eternal gratitude for your dedication and your fantastic presentations. Huge shout outs to David and the UNCTAD team, and Juan Jose, who I met as of yesterday, who heads the office here. Thank you so much for making this office available to us, this fantastic room, and to Kumba, who makes all things happen. And we really appreciate that. To Cecilia, Sam, and Rafe, we couldn't have done this without you, so really thank you. Thank you, Harrison and Vivek, for all you did to make this event happen as well. To our friends at the Aquatic Blue Food Coalition for your continued support. And last but certainly not least, huge thanks, special thanks to the Global Seaweed Coalition's communications manager, Azadine Battis, who often works behind the scenes, but we couldn't do what we do without you, Azadine. So thank you for all of your hard work preparing the event and anything that follows. So we hope that you all found this event informative. Please reach out to any of us afterwards if you'd like to discuss further. I'm going to be in New York for a couple more days, so if you'd like to set up a follow-up meeting, we can do that. And we look forward to seeing you on the membership roster. We look forward to welcoming you at future events. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.